Hey everyone, Matt Brady here, the Carolina Mortgage Coach. And on today's episode of Behind the Closing Table, I'm with Brad Spink of the Spink Group with KW Realty. And I've known Brad for a while. We were old gym buddies many years ago. And then Brad moved to a different part of the state, but we still stayed in contact. And he runs a team down in the Greenville area. So thank you, Brad, for being on. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you? And as we were just talking now, your story has kind of changed over the last year or two also with what you're doing in real estate. So give everyone a little introduction to you and how you got into the real estate game.
Yeah, so I'm from Greenville, born and raised in Greenville. I have spent a little bit of time, up your way in Charlotte back when I was in a leadership role for Keller Williams. But um I got into real estate in 2004. Um, even before I was in real estate, I went to college. I went to Wofford and I went to college with a guy who was already buying properties when we were in college. And so became friends with him. And I was fascinated by the idea that even at 21, 22 years old, he already owned rental properties and things like that. So I thought that was really cool. And so I thought real estate would be something that I would maybe always do on the side, that I might start to accumulate some properties, whether that be rentals or flips or whatever. I just thought real estate was a really cool thing, but I had never thought about it as a career. And then in 2004, um, was going through a little bit of a job change and started thinking about, well, maybe real estate could be a career for me and not just a hobby.
Mhm.
And so, got into the business in 2004, was very young, didn't really know what I was doing. But fortunately, it was a really good market back then in 2004, 5, 6. So if you just showed up every day and did some of the right things, you could certainly make a living.
Mhm.
Um, and then 2010, got into a leadership role for Keller Williams, where I was leading some offices for them for about 5 years and did that. And then in the middle of 2015, decided, I've had enough fun with that. Think I'm going to start to build my own team, get back into the real estate sales side of things. And so that's what I've done since then.
Awesome.
Uh, it's been a process, but everything that I've done in this career has, I've learned a lot from back when I started, and I was having to figure it out. And then even in a leadership role where I was helping agents build their business, and then being back on this side of things for the last 11, 12 years, and building my own team. You just kind of use that knowledge that you've gotten along the way and still helps me today.
Awesome. Being in that leadership and growing a team and stuff like that, there's a lot of new people entering real estate as a career every day. What do you think separates the ones that last in this industry versus the ones that fizzle out in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the main thing it comes down to persistence. I think that has helped me more than anything. It's a difficult business. I think it's much harder than people realize from the outside. They think we just, you know, we go out, we show some homes, we open doors, people decide which house they want to buy, and then we do it, and then we help them. But there's so much more to it than what people realize, and I think being persistent. Deals aren't always going to work out as you hoped. You're going to come up with there's going to be just hurdles along the way. I mean, getting a house under contract isn't necessarily a difficult thing. Getting it to the closing table is the challenge. And so, how well can you problem solve along the way? And that to me is kind of what separates people: is are they persistent? Are you willing to keep following up? Are you willing to keep following up with the same lead the eighth, ninth, 10th time? Um, are you willing to, you know, problem solve along the way? and figure out, okay, we've got this issue that came up during the transaction. How do we fix it?
Yeah,
How do we fix it? How can I work well with the other agent involved to get us to the closing table? And being able to be creative sometimes about how you get stuff done. Um, and so to me, that's kind of what separates it. We're all going to have frustrating days. I mean, people ask me, how I enjoy being in real estate, and I say probably 48 weeks a year. I love what I do. And then there's 3 or 4 weeks a year where I think this is the dumbest business. Why am I doing this? Maybe I'll just go do something else. And I mean, we all have transactions that we work really hard on, and for whatever reason, they fall apart, and you've put a lot of time and energy and effort into it, and you end up not getting paid on that deal. And I always kind of give myself like 24 hours to sulk about it, be frustrated about it, be mad about it, and then it's like, all right, time to get over it and move on. And so I think that's part of what helps you have a long career.
definitely. I think an underrated skill that people don't do is also handling expectations of what happens after someone gets under contract. It's they freak out when the conditional approval, "Oh, what's this? Does that mean there's issues?" No, it's just the normal way of, going on a process, and then also handling um, you know, buyer's remorse, going under contract.
Mhm.
That's such a big part. Even if you love the house, there's still that back of the mind that some people have of, am I making the right decision? So handling expectations and the handling of people, I think, is an underrated skill that people outside of real estate don't understand what you're dealing with when on both sides, on the mortgage side
Yeah,
and the real estate agent side. Uh,
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the way our contract is written in South Carolina, I mean, you have a certain due diligence period for a certain amount of time. Let's say it's a 2-week due diligence period to have inspections, negotiate repairs, things like that, and um, then you have a termination fee that can be paid during the due diligence period if the buyer decides they don't want to move forward. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I find that agents that are not as experienced don't know how to overcome issues along the way, don't know how to properly set expectations and talk to their clients. Um, those are the ones that seem to have more deals terminate than everybody else. And so, I mean, like one expectation to set with your clients is regardless of how great the house is, the home inspection report's going to be 40 pages. And they're going to put everything on there that they see, and it doesn't mean that it's an issue. And that's an expectation that needs to be set. But if you haven't done that, especially when you have a first time buyer and they get that inspection report back and there's, you know, 52 items on it, they think the house is falling apart. They think the house is going to collapse tomorrow, you know? So if you haven't set that expectation that like, hey, every home inspection report is 40 pages. You just paid this person, $400 to come out. They're gonna note things, and doesn't mean that they necessarily need to be repaired. But yeah, I mean, communication goes a long way in this business for sure.
all right. So, we talked about how the past year and a half and real estate has been up and down with everything that's going on in the world and in the market and interest rates, everything like that. When you're going in to have a conversation with a buyer and a conversation with the seller, what's a tip that you give on both sides of the transaction?
Yes, obviously different conversations. So for a buyer, what I'm telling them is there's more on the market now to choose from. So they're in a good spot there. Yes, the interest rate may not be what you would like it to be. However, you can refi down the road. Even if it's a year from now, you can refi. Another option is if you don't like the rate or the payment, let's negotiate some closing costs. Let's get the seller to help us buy the rate down. So I don't want them to get hung up on interest rate. Um, so that's most of the conversation with a buyer. But we also talk about, are you open to new construction? Because if you are, those are the best incentives you're going to get as a buyer in our market. I mean, in our area, builders are giving, it's always tied to if you use their lender, their attorney, but they're giving possibly 4.99 interest rate on finished homes. They're paying all your closing costs. Typically, we're negotiating a fridge, washer and dryer, blinds. I mean, they're not going to get a better deal than that. And the builders have the margins to be able to do that. So that's the conversation on the buyer side. And then on the seller side, we have to price this correctly. One thing as far as a tip goes, I'm not really pricing homes right now based on sold comps. I'm pricing homes right now based on active competition. So I'm looking at, okay, there are 4 homes within a mile of yours that are very similar to yours, and here's where they're priced. Here's how long they've been on the market. Where do we need to price to be the next one that sells? And so, our market has changed. I mean, it changes so much, even within a year, that if I were to use comps from 9 months ago, 12 months ago to price, well, that was really a different market than what we're in today. So, um, would I maybe lean on stuff that's closed within the last 90 days? I mean, I'll certainly look at that, but I'm going to price my homes based on active competition. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that pricing is not an exact science, and that we're gonna do the best that we can, and that the market will tell us if we got it right or not.
Mhm.
And so, let's just say hypothetically, we price at 500 and we've been on the market for 14 days, we've had 1 showing, no offers, we haven't had a showing in a week. Well, then we need to probably have our first conversation about pricing and whether we're priced correctly. Um, the other thing is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but like I like to price within search parameters. I mean, that people search, 5 to 550, 550 to 600. Maybe some people search, if they're online on Zillow or whatever, they may search 5 to 525 or 525 to 550. I like to price within those search parameters. Um, I mean, if a home is worth, let's say, somewhere in the upper 400s, then we're probably just going to go ahead and price at 500 based on the way that people search for homes. Um, but we're also going to be aggressive about getting price reductions if we need to. I'm not one that's going to just sit back and let a property sit on the market without interest, and day by day goes by and we're losing momentum and we're not getting activity. Then we need to do something.
What's your advice to newer agents that maybe don't have the confidence as an experienced agent like yourself would have when you're sitting in front of a listing and there's a disagreement on what to list the price at? Because everyone has emotional value tied to their house. Everyone
Yeah.
thinks their house is worth more than maybe the market dictates. What's your tip
Mhm.
to a real estate agent that might not have the confidence yet to say, well, this is like, how do you stand the line of standing by what you believe in, but also keeping your client happy?
Right. Well, I think um, the first thing is you have that conversation about maybe built in price reductions. So you say, okay, well, I wanted to be at 475. You guys want to lean more toward 500. Number one, I want this to be collaborative. Um, when I work with a seller, I like for us to come up with an asking price. So it's not, well, Brad said this is the number. I want it to be collaborative. Here's the facts. Here's the information. Here's what the numbers say. Let's look at it together. I'm comfortable. I always tell them, "I'm comfortable in this range. So what do you guys what would you like to do?" Um, so number 1, I would say to a newer agent, keep it collaborative. And then if they insist on listing the home at a number that's maybe higher than what you wanted to go, then I would say, "Okay, let's do this. We're gonna start at your number, and on day 14, I'm going to call you, and if we have not had X amount of showings, or if we have not had an offer, then we're gonna go ahead and reduce to this number, and see if you can get their agreement on that. That we're gonna go ahead and reduce to X number on the 14th day if we haven't had an offer, if we haven't had, whatever, 5 showings." And so, um, that way, they still price at their number. However, you know that day 14, that phone call's coming, and if the house is not under contract or if you haven't had the right amount of activity, that we're gonna go to this, already agreed upon price reduction. So, I wouldn't just unless it's just outlandish, I wouldn't just walk away from a listing. I wouldn't say, "You guys are crazy. That number's crazy. Have a nice day," and walk out the door. I would most likely take the listing, but I would take it with the understanding that we're gonna price it at your price for 14 days.
Goes back to setting that expectation, like we talked about,
Right.
setting expectation.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So I think you can give a viewpoint that we haven't really gone down on this podcast yet of the investment property routes. And South Carolina has its own unique issues with investment properties with the tax rate compared, I guess, more on my side because we're right near the North Carolina border to where, there are big differences when it comes to that. What are some tips that you have for first time investors? Because everyone sees the TikTok videos, sees the TV shows. Everyone wants to get into investing now, flipping houses. What have you seen from your personal end, but also working with clients that this is what's going to
Mhm.
make this a successful venture for you, or this one could be a very costly one that bites you if you're not careful?
Yeah, and if you've done investment properties long enough, you've been on both sides of it. Like, you've had deals that went so well, and it was just the perfect deal. You got it at the right price, and you did really well on it when you sold it, and you made good money. And then I mean, I've had deals where I've had a deal a couple years ago that I worked on it for 6 months and put a lot of time and effort into it, and I think I walked away with $500. Um, and so we've both been on, everybody's if you've done it long enough, you've been on both sides of it. But what I usually recommend, and I do teach a intro to real estate investments class, and one of the first things that I go over in that class is you have to understand your buy box. And what I mean by your buy box is, and this took me a while to develop because, um, I had to learn from my mistakes. And so, a lot of times we learn more from our mistakes, unfortunately. And what I started doing was I started coming up with a buy box um, after a deal that went sideways, or, you worked on it for 6 months and you made $500. And I said, okay, what are my non negotiables from now on? And it was, well, I'm only going to buy 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. I'm only going to buy on what I call grandma friendly streets. Would I feel comfortable with my grandmother, my mother, my sister living on that street? Um, are there are there things that are going to be a distraction to the buyer? I can renovate this house and I can make it look amazing. Are there going to be things about the street, the surrounding area, that deter a buyer from wanting to purchase this home? Is there a huge, power tower behind the house? Um, are there, I bought an investment property, super cute house, and it looked great when we got done, but Next to it was a single wide that probably needed to be demolished. It looked so terrible. It was a rental. On the other side of the property was a vacant lot where the grass was 5 feet tall. And the guy that owned it stored like tractors and old cars that were rusted out and things like that. It was right off of a warehouse road where there was just one warehouse after the next after the next. So during the day, it was kind of noisy over there. And so all of these things were working against me. That now became part of my buy box. So I developed my criteria that said these are the types of properties I buy. I buy 3 bedroom, 2 bath homes on grandma friendly streets that don't have eyesores around it, that are between 1,100 to 1,600 square feet, 1,700 square feet. I don't want to renovate a house that's over 2,000 square feet. Um, I came up with my search criteria um, that I look for when it comes to investments, and I do not go outside of that because I've just learned when I go outside of that, it doesn't work. And I describe it to people. I say, "Hey, this is like dating. When you were single and you were looking for a partner, you probably had some criteria that said, here's the type of person I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody that has these qualities, and anytime that we've gone outside of that, when it comes to dating, how have those relationships worked out? Typically, they don't work out very well. And so it's the same way with real estate. You come up with your buy box and you say, this is my criteria, this is what I look for, and then you stick to it. And also, the other thing is, like, if you want to do marketing around your buy box, like if I want to send out a postcard campaign, then it's very easy for me to say, well, I want to target this area and let's filter it down. These are the types of homes I'm looking for. And it really helps you narrow your list of who you're going to market to, so you're only marketing to the people that fit your criteria.
Great tips. What is there a mindset or a skill set difference between investors that are fix and flippers versus and hold it for, rentals that you see? Is it two different mindsets or two different skill sets for those two different type of investors?
Yeah, and I think the more complicated side is the buy and hold, and the reason I say that is because getting it to cash flow can be complicated. And part of my intro to real estate investments class, we talk about rentals. And of course, in South Carolina, with the two different tax rates, that makes it difficult for a rental property to cash flow, because if the average person who lives in that home as their primary residence would be paying 2,000 a year in property taxes, the investor may be paying $5,000 a year. And so when you factor that in to your monthly payment, and then trying to find a tenant, that can a solid tenant that can pay the monthly rent and have it cash flow, it can be complicated. Not saying it can't be done, but you have to buy it right. You really have to buy it right. Um, the other thing is, um, there's a part of owning rental properties. The most savvy investors typically are investing in rental properties because of cost segregation. So, cost segregation is the idea that instead of taking depreciation on that property for, say, 27 and a half years, which is pretty typical for an investment property, you run what's called a cost segregation, and you're able to take the majority of that depreciation in year one. And so a lot of the more savvy real estate investors who buy rental properties are mainly interested in them um, for the cost segregation and for the tax savings. And then if they can get the property to cash flow, that's an extra bonus. Um, but I think it's a challenge. And I think you have to look at, um, if I take appreciation out of the equation, does this property make sense as a rental? Or am I only looking at it based on, well, it's not really gonna cash flow, but I am going to get 3 to 4% appreciation a year, so this investment makes sense. Um, I think that's a tough way to look at it, and I don't know that that always works out. Because when we talk about cash flow for a rental, an investor might say, "Yes, this property cash flows $200 a month." My question to that investor would be, "Is that really true?" Because the one month you had the plumbing leak, they sent the plumber out, that was a $400 fix. So you didn't cash flow for 2 months because your cash flow is $200 a month and you had a $400 plumbing bill. And then eventually you're gonna have to replace that HVAC or that roof, and that may be your cash flow for 3 years. That may be your cash flow for 2 years. So, um, it's not always when you own rental properties, it's not always a straight cash flow every single month. It's gonna vary. It's gonna vary based on the condition of the home. Does it need repairs? And so it's just a little bit more complicated. I think for newer investors, fix and flip is about, that's kind of real estate investing 101. It's a little bit simpler of a process. Obviously, you have to buy it right. Um, the other thing too is just you got to know who your buyer is. I mean, when I buy an investment property, if I know that I'm gonna put that on the market after rehab for 225, 250, well, I know the mindset of a 250 buyer. It's a first-time home buyer that's thrilled to be able to buy a home. They don't care that it's level 1 granite compared to level 3 granite. Like, they're not walking in the house expecting hardwood floors throughout. Like, they're not expecting high-end appliances and high-end fixtures. Like, and so sometimes first-time investors, they start over updating the house and spending more money than they need to for things that buyers don't see value in, especially in that price range. So, if you're gonna do the fix and flips, you just need to understand who's my buyer and what do they expect, and then you update it accordingly.
Do you think you need to have a good do it yourself background, or can you be successful, farming that out to a crew to do it? Or do you think it's obviously you might save cost if you can handle it
Yeah,
yourself, but do you see successful flippers that aren't the handyman that can do a lot of the work themselves?
right. Well, I can tell you one thing, I can't fix anything. Like, I don't have that skill,
Yeah.
okay? Um, I I hire everything out. I sub it out. So on my real estate projects, I'll tell you, up until a couple years ago, I was kind of the general contractor. So I would buy the property and then I would make a list of everything that needs to be done. And then I would hire those things out and sub it out. And then I was the guy that was showing up at the end of the day to check on everything. Are we on schedule? Did the flooring guys do what they were supposed to do? And where are we with each step of the process? And so I was making multiple trips to the property during the week, and it was very time consuming. And I kind of saw it as, well, this is my part of the job. I mean, I'm not handy, so, what I can do to keep things moving along is just to check up on these contractors and make sure everything's moving along. Once I started working with the contractor that I've been working with for the last few years, and I started to gain more and more trust in his ability to get things done and his understanding of me and, um, what my goals were for these projects, I became more comfortable with giving him more responsibility. And so now the way that we work is if I buy a flip, um, I will meet him over there. We'll walk the property. We will come up with a checklist of things. He'll send me a quote that night, and then he runs the entire project. And I might make 2 trips to the property now while it's being renovated instead of 15. And so I pay him a little bit more, let's just say hypothetically, I mean, it probably comes out to I pay him 3 or 4,000 more per job to run it. However, that frees me up. So now I get a lot of my time back, and these flips don't become so time consuming for me like they used to be. So, and he's also, he understands the grand scheme of things with me when it comes to the big picture. And so he's open to like, hey, um, if this project is tight and we need to stay in a really tight budget, I'm okay with doing it for X amount. And then could you give me an extra 3,000 when it sells on the back end, just on the closing statement? And that'll keep you in your budget, especially when it's like, you know, let's say he sends me a quote for 60 and I said, man, I really needed to keep it at 55 max. Then he's been flexible and said, all right, well, why don't we do this? When it closes, pay me this on the back end. And that'll keep you in your budget and we can get it on the market and hopefully you sell it as quickly as possible. And so when you find somebody like that wants to work with you long term and can see the big picture of things, it just becomes a huge luxury. And because we worked together for quite a while and I was able to see his work, I learned that I could trust him 100%. And so now I don't have to micromanage those projects. And so I can take on more projects, and I can, focus on other parts of my real estate business because I'm not having to make constant trips to a property and or trips to Lowe's to meet contractors, to pay for supplies and materials and things like that, like I used to.
Mhm. Now, for a new investor, someone getting into that, what would you recommend for how to build their network like that? What's a great way for someone getting into it to find those resources that you might not have in the beginning? Is it finding a mentor that flips and kind of using their network as your network? Or if you're starting out, you don't have that network, what's the best place to start gathering those contacts?
Yeah, I would talk to um, either other realtors that focus on investment, other investors. There's probably, in most areas, there's probably a group of investors that meet on a monthly basis. Like in our area, there's KREA, but then there's other real estate investment groups. Start going to some of those meetings. Get to know who most of the big investors are in your area if you don't already, and then just talk to them and honestly come at it from a very humble approach and just say, "Hey, I know you've done 100 of these and I'm looking at buying my first property. Do you have somebody you would recommend who does painting? Or do you have somebody you recommend that gives good prices on roofing?" And so just start to get a list of names, and just keep that, so that when you get that first property, you can get a couple good quotes on whatever painting, cabinets, kitchen work, flooring, HVAC, roofing, because you want to work with people that understand what you're doing and that for them, the goal is, a long-term relationship and it's volume business. So when you meet with that roofer, they understand it, Brad's not just going to do one roof with me. He's going to do 6 roofs with me this year. So I'm going to give him really good pricing, so that he doesn't go shop me. And, I'm not giving him the typical homeowner pricing. And so I would start by talking to other investors, talk to other realtors. Maybe there's realtors in your office that do decent amount of investment stuff. And then I would find like some of those social networks, and I would get recommendations. And you're going to find people you really like, and you want to continue to work with them in the future. And then you're going to find people that you go, okay, well, I did this one project with this contractor, and I won't work with them again because they didn't deliver on time, or they didn't show up when they were supposed to, or they charged me more than they said they were going to. And so it's going to be a bit of a process at first. Within a year or two of doing it, you're going to have it down. You're going to have your people that you wanna use on a consistent basis. I just did my first project. There was a guy that I will sometimes, as an investment, buy mobile home lots, and then there's a guy that I know who is always looking for mobile home lots. He has his mobile home dealer's license, and so I'll buy a lot and then 2 weeks later turn around and sell it to him. Maybe I make 8,000, 10,000, something like that. It's a quick turnaround. It's not a home run, but it's a quick turnaround, let's say to make $7,500 or something like that.
You don't go
So
broke taking a profit.
right, that's right. So I bought a 1.7 acre lot in a rural part of town. It's probably about 45 minutes from where I live, but it's an area that I've had listings there in the past, and they've always done well. So even though it's a rural area, um, they always sell well for whatever reason. So I bought this 1.7 acres, thinking I was just going to turn around and sell it to him. So I buy it, I close on it, I reach out to him. Hey, I got that 1.7 acres. And he says, man, I am just so swamped right now. I've got too many projects going on. I just can't buy that right now. But what if you do the deal and I'll help you? You can buy the mobile home from me. I'll give you a really good price for a brand new mobile home. And I'll give you all my subcontractors. I'm going to send you a list of everybody that does these projects for us. And that was invaluable. I mean, um, I bought the mobile home from him, and then I just went down his list of I didn't even know the order of who should go first and who goes second. So like I reached out to the first guy and I said, "Listen, Robert connected me to you. I just bought this brand new mobile home and he tells me he works with you and like what stage of the process do you come in?" And the good news was they all know each other because they work together all the time. So a lot of times I didn't even have to reach out to the next person. They were like, "Oh yeah, is Bruce coming in behind me?" "Yeah." "Okay, well, I'll tell him that we're ready for him." Great. And so they even communicated with each other along the way, which made things really easy. So I just got that on the market a couple weeks ago and it's under contract. And so now I'm thinking about, okay, well, that went pretty well. Um, well, let's go do the second one. And all of that came out of me buying a lot that I expected to sell to someone, and he ended up not buying it. So then I had to come up with my plan B, but it gave me an opportunity to learn an investment type that I had never done before. And so it's been really interesting.
Awesome. So, we're coming to the end here. We've gone for full circle from real estate agent tips to buying and selling tips to down the investing side. When people walk away from the closing table with you as their agent, what are you hoping they remember from the experience? Whether they're on the buy side, the listing side, they're an investment client, what do you hope they take away when Brad is their real estate agent?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we made the process enjoyable for them. That it wasn't this stressful situation where, let's say somebody buying their first home, that can be stressful sometimes. Um, or selling a home that maybe they raised their family in and now they're empty nesters. And so they're selling this home and there's a lot of memories there. And that's a very emotional process. Just that Brad was there to guide us through, to set the expectations. Things went as he said that they would. And, you know, his knowledge of the business, the way that he handled things as they came up during the transaction, he handled things that might have caused us stress and he took care of it and he took that off our plate so that we could just enjoy the process and, show up at the closing table and, feel like it was a smooth process and that we were glad that we chose to work with him. And so that's the main thing for me. I guess the other thing would be that, Brad always put our interests first. And that's something that has been a philosophy of mine from day one, which is I'm never going to make decisions in a real estate transaction based on what benefits me. I'm always going to make decisions based on what benefits my clients the most. And so, if clients feel like I guided them through the process, made it a smooth process, and I always had their back, I always was looking out for their best interest, then I feel like that's all I can ask for.
Well, that's awesome. I had a great conversation today. Got a lot of great information here. If anyone wants to get in contact with Brad for, buying, selling, investment properties, anything like that, he has a team for the right agents. All his contact information will be in the video. He's on Facebook, he's on Instagram. Their new website will be up soon. So give Brad a call for any of your real estate needs. I just want to thank you for being on today and thank you everyone for watching. This is your latest episode of Behind the Closing Table with Matt Brady. Everyone have a great day.